My name is Phil Perazio, and I'm a urologic oncologist, a surgeon. Like many of you, I absolutely love what I do, and I would not choose another profession. But I have struggled with professional identity, practice efficiency, and wellness over the years. Operate with Zen is a podcast designed to explore a mindful approach to surgery and to being a surgeon. By discussing these struggles and mindful solutions, I hope together we can create a community of strong and healthy surgeons. Enjoy. Welcome to Operate with Zen. Today I have the great pleasure of being joined by Dr. Jody Foster. Dr. Foster, introduce yourself to the audience.
I am a clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm the chair of the psychiatry department at Pennsylvania Hospital. I'm the inaugural assistant dean for professionalism at the Perelman School of Medicine. I've been running our professionalism program at the health system for about a dozen years. I am also a senior advisor to the Wharton Executive MBA program, where I got my MBA. And most recently, I've become the team mental health clinician for the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's how I spend my time.
Yeah, really interesting. A lot of hats you wear, a lot of really important roles you play, and a lot of it's around professionalism. And the flip side of that is we could call disruptive behaviors, which we all know.
Definitely.
We all know we encounter sometimes. So if you don't mind, give us a little history on you and kind of how these roles have evolved and the importance of, I know it kind of coincides with professionalism and
Sure.
how that all coincides together.
Sure. So most of my clinical career has been spent treating serious mental illness on locked, generally acutely psychotic adult psych units. But I've always had an interest in business, during the course of my training, the healthcare system switched over to managed care, which had a big effect on psychiatry, and I was really impressed by the effect of sort of money on medicine. And for that reason, I decided maybe I was going to leave medicine and go get an MBA. I got an MBA in finance, actually. When I got to business school, though, I learned pretty quickly that I was much more effective and valuable to the corporate sector as a psychiatrist than as anything in the corporate world, because just week after week, friends and colleagues would come, and just the questions and the curiosity that they posed about the people around them, their coworkers, their spouses, their kids, why people act the way that they act. And a lot of the stories were about people who were kind of causing trouble. And it impressed me right from the get-go, just the tremendous overlap between the behavioral discontrol of, executives and how similar it was to my psychiatric patients on the psych floor. And eventually, when I became a mother, how similar it was to the behavior of children. And so the great overlap in behavior and what's considered good behavior and bad behavior became a real point of interest for me. I'm someone who's always gotten bored every couple of years with my job, so variety is really important to me. But I was also raised by parents who lived through the Depression, so I was also taught that I had to keep my job. So I've been at Penn; it'll be almost 33 years at this point. But I've changed my job every couple of years, and I really am thankful to Penn for keeping the job interesting for me. Kind of as I developed in my career, I started at some point, I would spend half the day in the morning treating, homeless, indigent, psychotic people, and then spend the afternoon treating, chairs and chiefs and executives, and all, about their mood states, their behavior, and what was causing them trouble in their lives. And again, like I said, the overlap was tremendous. At some point, Wharton asked me to do a an alumni interview about the work. And right after that article was published, I got a call from a publicity agent who asked me to write a book on the matter. And so I wrote a book called The Schmuck in My Office: How to Deal Effectively with Difficult People at Work. And I named it that not because the people who get into trouble with other people are schmucks by any means. In fact, just the opposite. But in fact, to reflect the incredible frustration that people have when they call me about such people because, you know, they haven't been able to effectively manage the situation. So that's kind of how I got where I am.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And there's, I think, some really important things to highlight. First of all, I will fully endorse your book. It's an amazing read. Usually I hold these things up on screen, so if anybody's watching on YouTube, they can see the actual book. But I gave it to my clinic manager, and he's currently reading it because guess what? We have schmucks in our offices too. And it really is an insightful book. It's highly, in addition, not only informative, but entertaining, because as you read through the book, you certainly interact with people in all the categories you describe, and it helps kind of solidify these concepts. I just wanted to say before we get into this a little more, some of my favorite parts of this podcast are talking with psychiatrists and mental health professionals. As surgeons, we're trained a certain way to think, and psychiatrists are trained a different way to think. And we learn so much by interacting in our different ways and learning how to process and think about how other people are going through these things. So I just want to thank you for spending the time. And I know this is going to be insightful kind of as we move through this. So thank you.
I have to tell you, I have always experienced a tremendous overlap between surgeons and psychiatrists. And I don't know if your listeners will agree, but I've always seemed to note that when somebody decides to leave surgery, they often go into psychiatry. And I can tell you that if I didn't do psychiatry, I absolutely would have done surgery. So there's something to be said.
Well, good. So we talked a little bit of the overlap: CEOs, healthcare, children. Specifically, listen, we all know there are issues in healthcare. This podcast is specifically designed for surgeons, but listen, we know there's a lot of overlap there, and this could be widely applicable. But why is this so important in healthcare? Or why do we see so many disruptive behaviors? Is there something special about healthcare, or is this just status quo for society?
I don't think it's that we see so much more disruptive behavior in healthcare. I think that the stakes are just higher. So, I mean, the whole reason that this became an issue in healthcare is because of the Joint, Commission in 2008 making that sentinel announcement that disruptive physician behavior undermined quality and safety.
Yeah. So one of the things you talk about in the book right up front is kind of definitions of disruptive behavior and professionalism. And I love the way you define it kind of in childhood psychiatry and psychology. Is it violates the rights of others, it disrupts societal norms. And we certainly see these behaviors, but I thought the most important part is that most people are not doing this because they're bad people.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you don't mind, just kind of expand on this a little bit. Where do these behaviors come from? Why might people behave poorly?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that really an important basic tenet is to accept that, people do not set out to be disruptive. People do not set out to have conflicts. At the same time, conflict is entirely normal. We all have conflicts. We all kind of imagine that we can avoid them and hope we can avoid them because, most of us tend to be conflict avoidant. But at the end of the day, conflict is perfectly normal. I like to say, if you put two atoms in a jar, no matter how big the jar is, those two atoms are going to find each other and they're going to bounce against each other. And, same as when you've first fallen in love with someone and you really can't conceive that you're ever going to disagree or have a fight with that person. And then, of course, 50% of marriages end in divorce because conflict is simply normal. But why we have conflict is really multifactorial. And I think that what happens is that we as people, as we're growing up, we just figure out how to navigate the world. And we try to navigate the world in as adaptive a way as possible for whatever environment we're in. And we make, decisions about what kind of culture we want to be in and what kind of culture we want to raise our kids in. When it was time for my son to go to school, I have a decision. Do I send him to a Quaker school? Do I send him to a military school? I mean, what kind of culture do I want him to be in? They're all totally legitimate cultures, but they're really different. And so what if I take, my, now fully conflict resolution oriented son and plop him in a military school? He's going to have trouble, And I think that this is the thing. We grow up and we find our unique way to navigate the world. And I say unique, even though, they can be categorized largely, but it's different for each of us and why we do it. And it works for us. And this is how we move forward. We find ways to navigate. It's just that we don't always find ourselves in cultures that are fully embracing of the traits that we've kind of engendered to do that navigation. And I find that a lot of the conflicts happen when, there's either a new team or a new environment or something where what somebody does everywhere in their life, at home with the family, with their friends and other jobs, and then suddenly at this job, it doesn't work right. And that's when conflict ensues. And again, they're not doing anything bad. They're acting the way that they've always acted. We all have personalities and we bring our personalities to work with them. But then the problem becomes confounded when we, because we're conflict avoidant, don't stop that person and say, hey, Joe, what you're doing doesn't work here. I can see that you're not trying to, cause trouble, but that's really not how we do things here. Instead, we go to the water cooler and talk about it. And so here we are talking about Joe. Joe's doing what he's always done his entire life, so thinks he's fine. And yet two narratives are in play. And it really comes back to bite people and just sort of makes these conflicts that could be easily resolved with one good conversation just sort of spiral into these maelstroms.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most profound statistics in the book. And you and I have talked about this before. In the medical literature and medical science, 60% of disruptive physicians will eliminate that pattern of behavior if you just bring it to their attention. And it's probably higher than that.
Oh, it's even higher. I mean, if you listen to, if you look at the data most recently, it's more like 75 to 80% of people. And that is the crazy and most important statistic. If you just say to the person, please stop, your behavior is causing distress, they stop because they didn't know.
Right. You can't fix what you don't know about.
Right. And I will tell you that, okay, so let's say 80%, 75, 80% of people will stop because they didn't know. There's a couple of things to that. If you bury your head in the sand and don't say anything, they're never going to know. But if you tell them and they say, oh, I didn't realize, I'll certainly do my best to stop. But again, I mentioned we're creatures of habit. So it's not out of the question to think that 6 months later, that person might do that thing again, just because, they spent a lifetime doing it. It's so much easier to go back to that person and say, hey, that thing we talked about, you're doing it again. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm just so used to doing it. As opposed to letting year after year after year pass, so that 15 years into the job, they say, why has nobody ever told me this? That's one thing. The other thing is that 75 to 80% leaves 20 to 25%. So what about them? So I would, from my experience, I would say that, I don't know, 15 to 20% of people who are having a problem with their behavior, behaving badly, whatever you want to call it, and are confronted with it, will, they may resist it up front or whatever, but at some point, this percentage of people will probably own up, yeah, you know what, this is a problem. I see it's a problem. It's getting in the way. They might say, it's always been a problem, but I've never known how to fix it. This is just how I, was raised to be. I don't know any other way. Well, those people are just handing you on a silver platter the fact that they're totally workable. I know this is a problem. I don't know how to fix it. We can give tools to those people. The world is their oyster in terms of change. But there's going to be 5 to 10% of people who, when you say, your behavior is a problem, they go, I don't care. That's how I act. And I like how I act. Screw you. I'm the best surgeon in the world. So those are the people that we have to take sort of non-insight oriented approaches to, and more kind of behavioral or limit setting approaches with.
That's great. I think, I'm going to push you later. We'll try to get into some of these insight versus non-insight examples. Yeah. But, before we get there and start talking about some of the things we may encounter surgically or medically, I think one of the other things you bring up, just to kind of lay some more foundation too, is kind of what you alluded to, but what we bring to the table, what we bring to this interaction. And it's not only having an open mind and trying to be empathetic and understanding why somebody else may be acting poorly, but to understand that when we have a really strong emotional response to someone, we play part of the role too in
Right.
kind of the conflict.
Right. Right. I have sort of 5 basic principles when you're having conflict with somebody. And the very first one is check yourself. I mean, you know, if you and I are standing right next to each other and we witness an interaction, I might find the interaction horrific, and you might say, it was fine. And similarly, you know, it may be just the opposite, because we are each bringing our different baggage to the table, and we process these things differently. So when you've had a conflict, or when you've had a bad interaction, or when you're feeling upset about somebody's behavior, the very first thing to do is to say, is this objectively problematic? You know, obviously, if somebody comes to work and punches somebody in the face, that's objectively problematic. None of us are going to ask questions. But if somebody's condescending, or if somebody uses humor that is objectionable, or things like that, different kinds of people are going to react differently based upon what they bring. So the very first step on deciding whether to intervene is this really happening, or is this more me than anything else? And then, you know, after you've done that, there's a couple of more steps which I can tell you, where we can, you know, go on to other things.
Tell us. That's we're here.
So the second thing is, you know, okay, yeah, so something's happening. And by the way, there's enough passive aggressive behavior out there that sometimes determining that something's happened at all is a problem. I've had people be, you know, incredibly aggressive or otherwise with me, and it's taken me 3 or 4 days to even realize it happened because, you know, people can be so insidious in some of this stuff. But again, conflict of some sort first, you know, check yourself. Second, name the beast. What exactly are they doing that's upsetting you? You know, is it that they're yelling? Is it that they're making you feel humiliated? Is it that they're disparaging their colleagues? Is it that they're physically aggressive? Is it that they're menacing? Is it that they make you feel manipulated? Is it, you know, what is it? If you don't name the beast, then you don't know what you're dealing with. And if you don't know specifically what you're dealing with, you really kind of lose the edges on how to intervene with it. Again, all these people call me, and again, you know, referential to the name of the book, they call me and they say, Jody, I should have called you 10 years ago. I have this schmuck, I have this jerk, I have this ass in my department. And I go, okay, well, what is he or she doing? And they go, he's just a jerk. No. What are they doing? Yeah. You know, and you get a lot of, like, you know, grunts of exasperation, but you don't really get like words until you actually press and press and press. It's super important to, like, define what the thing is. The third thing then is try to empathize with the person. Like we said, 99.9% of people are not doing this out of malice. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm gonna upset people at work today. So what's going on for them? You know, people tend to put themselves out there if you're actually going to, you know, able to close your mouth long enough to listen. And, you know, maybe something's going on at home. Maybe there's a temporal situation. Maybe there's a physical situation, a depressive situation. We don't know. So try to empathize with what might be going on for them that might have engendered them to behave in this manner. And then the fourth thing is call it out. Don't wait the 10 years. Recognize that you know, 80% of people are going to respond if you just tell them, and that sitting on it actually almost makes you complicit. And then finally, be direct and be concise. There's nothing better than saying what you have to say in clear, direct terminology, because the more words you use, the more, first of all, people's heads get flooded and they can't really hear the message. And second of all, the more words you use, the more fodder you're giving them to ruminate about it later and permute it into something you didn't say. So just say it straight.
Yeah, I think incredible advice. And, you know, as I'm kind of growing into leadership roles, you encounter these things, and now it's my now it's my responsibility to actually deal with some of these things. And so I think this is great advice. If you haven't noticed, I'm taking notes to make sure I'm picking up everything here. One of the points I want to ask about a little bit, and I think it might be a good segue into kind of some of the personalities we encounter, is that, you know, point 3, talking about empathizing, trying to understand where somebody's coming from. And I even think back personally to some of my bad behaviors. or less good behaviors. I'll be positive about myself. But no, listen, I've acted poorly, and I've acted in ways that I have not been proud of in the operating room and outside of the operating room.
All of us have.
All of us have. It's part of being human. And when I think back, a lot of the times I behaved that way, there was a lot of other things going on.
Yep.
And my poor behavior, not making excuses, but was kind of a lack of ability to kind of control emotions or whatever else was going on.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, I've also been able to step back and say, oh my God, I'm really sorry. This is why I acted this way. And I shouldn't have done that, and try to be insightful about that. And I think you have to give people that kind of gracious out every once in a while too. And I try and tell, I think the best example is driving on the highway. Somebody cuts you off and goes taking off. And listen, most of the time it's probably just because they're a jerk and they're driving crazy. But listen, maybe there is a medical emergency. Maybe there's something going on in their family. And the only thing you could do by stepping on your accelerator and going after them is make it worse. Right. And I think we encounter that a lot in medicine and in surgery. And sometimes you just got to give people the gracious out. But I certainly think there's a part of time where, and please correct me if I'm using the terminology wrong, but there are personality problems, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's definitely reasons people can act this way. And I think one of the things we all like to do is be amateur psychiatrists and pretend we can diagnose personality disorders in our colleagues and people we see. But tell us, is that the right thing? Should we be kind of putting these personality disorder labels on people? Is this why people act badly too?
So I'm going to get a little technical on you.
Yeah.
In order to have a personality disorder, you have to have real trouble in your social or occupational functioning. You have to have impairments in those areas. This is a podcast by a surgeon for surgeons. So we are talking about a high functioning population. So unless we're talking about somebody who can't keep a job, or who's on their sixth or seventh marriage, in general, we're talking about people who have stable, good employment, are high functioning, and likely have families, friends, and a stable. So we're not talking about people with personality disorders. And that's one of the key points of the book, is that when someone's doing something we don't like, we want to call them crazy, we want to call them disordered, we want to say that there's something wrong, when in fact I really want to drive it home, they're just being themselves. And there's going to be hosts of people who love the way that they act. It's just that the way that they're acting in the environment where you're in is a problem. There's going to be a sort of a group that is accepting of how this person behaves, or they wouldn't keep behaving that way. And so we're not dealing with personality disorders, but we are dealing with personality traits. And, having done this for as many years as I have, and hearing, this, no matter what we do in medicine, when you hear the same kinds of stories over and over and over again, even though obviously each person is different, you can kind of bucket those stories. And it's the exact same thing in my field. And so, I hear everybody thinks that their story is, has incredibly, unique nuance to it. And in my mind, I'm just putting it in one funnel or the other, or a couple of funnels, because all of the stories tend to blend together. And this is where the 10 types of interpersonal, disruptive characters comes from. When I was asked to write the book, I had to kind of organize my thoughts, and it became really clear really fast that, at least from my experience, there are 10 types of people who kind of get into interpersonal trouble at work. And believe me, people don't fall neatly into one of these categories. People in general, it's more like 2 or 3, but the categorization helps. So for example, if you know that you're working with the character I might call a bean counter, someone who's obsessive, micromanaging, controlling, rigid, can't make a decision because it's better to not make a decision than to make a wrong decision, that kind of person, when you're dealing with, one of these characters, it really is helpful to know that what's driving this person is, a terrified fear of control, of loss of control. And that if you can help them, maintain control, see control, trust that you are diligent and detail-oriented, you're going to do a lot better with that person. Your task isn't to cure that person, because, again, that person's moving through life just fine in most arenas. And if they're not, if they're consistently not moving through life just fine, then they're going to need some sort of intervention. But in terms of you're dealing with them, when you know let's say your boss is a bean counter, then you want to kind of rise to the detail-oriented occasion around them, because it's going to help the relationship. So it's that kind of thing about saying, okay, what do I know about this person, and what's the best way to be empathic to what this person is really afraid of, and help this person know that I'm going to help them, keep a homeostatic environment as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and that's definitely one of the types we encounter in surgery and in medicine.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We all
Well,
have.
thank God. I mean, you want detail in your
Right,
surgeon, right?
exactly. And to your point, some of these characteristics are why these people are so successful. Very detail oriented, and the problem becomes when it gets in the way of personal relationships or getting things done. And I love the way you bring that up, of kind of lessen their anxiety, understand where they're coming from and why they're upset. It's not because they want to control your life; it's because they're terrified of losing control of their life.
Right.
And the other point I like to think with these personality types or traits is that you can strengthen yourself with a bean counter if you're not detail oriented, right? If you're tend to be, and I know this because this is me a little bit, I tend to be more of a big picture person than a detail oriented person,
right.
Except when I'm in the operating room. But I love having detail oriented people around because they keep me balanced. They keep me in check.
Right.
And so we can also balance and strengthen each other by understanding some of these difficulties.
Absolutely. That's how to put together a great team, is to have, these character types that balance one another out. I mean, in medicine and in all of the high functioning fields, the more common characters are these bean counter types and people with narcissistic, dynamics. And, and the narcissist is someone who presents as inflated or very egocentric, but we know that underneath that is a tremendous insecurity, more insecurity than the average person. And that's what drives some of the behavior that we find so difficult.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one I've encountered the most when I was reading the book. Is definitely you see narcissists a lot, and you see different shades of it. And I think we're all guilty of it to some degree too, right? I mean,
Sure.
it takes a lot of self-confidence and a little bit of self-fear to be able to operate on people on a regular basis.
Totally. I mean, so many of these characters, you have to realize that there are tremendous upsides. It's great to be detail oriented. You don't make mistakes. It's great to have self-confidence. It means you have the self-confidence to apply to medical school and to a surgery residency. It's great. It's just that when these traits start to overwhelm or start to really define who you are or how you are interacting, and it's not in a setting where that's welcome, that you have real problems.
Yeah. And just to be concrete, give us some help with the narcissist, right? You told us the bean counter, credit them for their detail oriented nature, work on being more detail oriented yourself to kind of lower some of their anxieties. How do we deal with the narcissist?
Well, let me just say one more thing with bean counter. And if you make a mistake with your bean counter boss, let's say, the worst thing to do is to say, no big deal. That's the worst thing you can do. They will lose trust in you forever. So, to be able to own your mistakes, clarify that you recognize that these mistakes were in play, and that you are going to do everything you can to not make those kinds of mistakes, and that you can be trusted and are, detail oriented yourself. I mean, to go up to a bean counter and say, stop being so detail oriented, is like the worst thing you can do. With narcissists, again, so the core to the kind of personality dynamic is that there's this, on the one hand, there's this inflated sense of self, limitless potential. All roads lead to me. Every conversation, the conversation gets turned, to me. There's nothing I can't do, my way or the highway. People, take credit for the team's work. This kind of person. What we don't see up front is that it's kind of a hard way to live, to be that inflated all the time. It's kind of like spending your life keeping the air blown up in a balloon, and it becomes really important to the narcissist character, because in fact there really is a core of low self-esteem. And the drivers may be that there were kind of different parental messages, maybe a shaming negative father and an adoring sort of expansive mother. The dichotomy usually starts early, and again leads to this sort of split of I'm worried that I'm not all that. I'm worried that I'm not good. And the defense is, I'm the best. I'm going to fill the room with myself. I don't want anyone to see my vulnerabilities. So I'm going to be so boorish, and I'm going to fill the room up with me so that nobody can get near the core of me and see that maybe there are some, cracks there. And so this is a hard way to live, I like to use the analogy of a balloon. So if the narcissist's ego is like the size of a peanut, you take that little peanut ego and you put it in a balloon, and Narcissus blows that balloon up as big as it can get. And that's, the ego that he's, walking through the world with, he or she. And that's to kind of stay big all the time. But when there's an injury or an insult or something that hurts that narcissistic bubble, like a balloon, it pops, it right sizes just like that. And that's why this is such a fragile character. The biggest, strongest, most kind of bloated people are in fact our most vulnerable. And you need to find an empathic spot for that if you're going to get along with them. So, one category or one strategy is to actually, appreciate them. And people usually roll their eyes when I say this, but find ways to compliment them. And I'm not talking about just blowing smoke. I mean, because they'll obviously sniff that out. But I mean, if they've done a good lecture, hey, that was a great lecture. We often only say what's negative instead of stopping to say what's positive. And with the narcissist character, stopping to say the positive. Hey, is that a new suit? Or your office looks great. Or I heard your lecture today. It was wonderful. Things like that. It'll kind of be a signal to that person that they don't have to try so hard with you, and it'll soften the relationship. The other thing is that some narcissistic characters don't really appreciate the way they're coming off because they don't have an inherent empathy. They don't really think about the experience of others the way others of us might. And so to actually almost take them by the hand and bring them to the other side of the conversation is helpful. When Adam asked that question during your lecture, your lecture, I just thought it was fantastic. Just one thing, when Adam asked that question, and you before you answered it, you responded with, "Well, that's a really stupid question." I think that that might have made Adam feel bad, and I wonder if you were in a lecture and the speaker said that your question was stupid, how would you feel about that? And as ridiculous as this example is, for a lot of these narcissistic characters, it will be the first time they ever bothered to think about what it would be like to receive that. But the biggest thing that I think is an important intervention, and this is one that I work with all the time, is that, I'll commonly get let's say a surgeon who's sent to me and they've been, very aggressive or angry or whatever with other people. And, the first half of our meeting is spent, telling me how it's everybody else's problem and they were right and all this kind of stuff. And then at some point in the meeting, I might say something like, it strikes me that you have tremendous leadership capability, and maybe you could be a dean one day or a chair one day. It's just that this thing you do, the way you punch people in the face when you come to work, this thing that you do, it's getting in the way of your ability to achieve your goals. That generally will stop someone in their tracks, and they'll be like, I've always thought I could be a chair, or I've always thought I could be a dean. And I think you're right. I've heard this before, that some of my behaviors actually get in the way of me being able to progress. And once you have that person feeling appreciated by you, understood by you, and understanding that you're going to, help them, you have a whole different ballgame.
That's incredible. I think that's great practical advice. And not to sensationalize any of this at all, but listen, then there's also podcasts and stories like Dr. Death, where narcissist goes to the extreme. And we see, especially like you said, surgery is high stakes, medicine is high stakes, and we see people become dangerous. Yeah. Where do you kind of see that line being crossed or blurred, or, how are we vigilant for those things?
Well, I mean, we always have to be, when we're talking about the world of clinical competence, that's a different story. If we're concerned about someone's clinical ability to practice, then we're into fitness for duty, and we're into, a totally different arena. What you and I are talking about are people's behaviors and interactional styles that get in their way. But by the time anyone thinks someone is dangerous, we have a whole different armamentarium that we're going to look into.
And we'll get to that later, and kind of how to escalate things and what's the right way to escalate and kind of work through some of these things. But the other personality type I feel like I encounter in surgery and in medicine a fair amount is the robotic. I can either expand on it, or if you want to expand and just kind of tell the audience, who's the robotic?
I mean, so in colloquial terms, this would be someone who we might say lives on the spectrum, but we are, by no means talking about people who have actual autism spectrum issues. We're talking about people who just really lack interpersonal nuance, and just really don't know how to interact with others, even though we always find this, they really want to, they just don't know how to. They're just not good at it. And for whatever reason, we do see a lot of this in science, and certainly in engineering and things like that. This is someone who might have become fascinated by trains in youth or adolescence, and then becomes a mechanical engineer who works on these kinds of things. I see it a lot I see it frequently in Schmuck, which is so difficult because, this is a field where the delivery of bad news is not uncommon. And when you take somebody with poor interpersonal nuance and you give them the task of delivering bad news, you can see how it could go really wrong. And so I see a fair amount of that. But the type, because they lack this nuance, they tend to be pretty rigid. They tend to be very routine oriented. They need things to be done in a certain, this is different from the bean counter who's just, detail, detail, detail. This is, in my sphere, things have to be done this way. There is right and there is wrong. There is nothing in between. And if something's done wrong, they have a tendency to just sort of tantrum. And this is what makes them a little bit different. You kind of can't get to them because you don't know how to connect with them because they have inherent problems with connection.
Yeah. And you break down some subtypes too. And I think we see the circuit overloader subtype of the robotic in surgery all of the time. These are people who are full of opinions. They have little filter, and they kind of explode when things, as you said, aren't going in the way that they predetermined that they should go. Yeah.
Although I have to say, I mean, we can also see explosion in Narcissist, and we can see explosion in the bean counter. You can see explosion in almost all of these characters, which is why, they're on this list of who gets into trouble with other people. But, the thing about the robotic is that because there's none of this nuance, there's none of this, hey, how you doing? What'd you do this weekend? There's none of that humanity in the middle of it. I mean, some of the Narcissus and even the bean counter characters can be appealing people, but robotics tend to just be hard to connect with. And so when they act badly, people already didn't understand them in the first place. And when they act badly, people just hate them. And that's when they run to the incident reporting system, and I don't understand him, I don't like him, and he was throwing charts in the middle of the nursing station. And the intervention, it's not easy. It's actually social skills training. As crazy as that may sound, there are adult interventions for. I mean, I don't want to. It's etiquette training. When someone says, "Good morning, how are you?" say, "Fine, thank you. How are you?" Things. It's really very basic interpersonal etiquette training.
Yeah, for me, this is one of the easiest groups to empathize with because this group truly doesn't want to cause problems. They just don't understand how to interact.
They don't know how to do better. They desperately want relationships. They want people to like them. They want friends. I agree that these are tragic. Some of them are tragic characters.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are the main three I think I see in medicine and surgery a lot. I don't know if you had any other, groups or patterns that you see that you wanted to bring up with the group.
I mean, I see, I see all of them, so it's hard for me to break it down. I do see sometimes what I call the Venus flytrap character, which is somebody more often female, but not always, someone who's just sort of really, really seductive and draws you in up front, and kind of puts you on a pedestal, and you kind of get more excited about a relationship with them than you might with other people. But then they have a way to just go from black to white. And just as they overvalued you up front, then they kind of devalue, and things kind of go really south really fast, and they cause a lot of drama. And they can be some really prickly characters that you really feel like you're walking on eggshells around. And then I guess the suspicious is another character, just someone who has a conspiratorial outlook on the world, and everything you say magically can get weaved into their narrative of how the department's against them, the world's against them, whatever it is. And then the distracted character, you don't see this as much in surgery, thankfully, but these are people, the ones who they just can't close their charts. They just can't organize their workspace. They just can't finish the deal. And, people get angry at them because of things like that. And then, of course, every field of medicine has people who might have issues with substance use, and people who might have medical problems going on. But again, lion's share, I agree with you in terms of
Yeah.
who we're generally seeing.
Yeah, and I think it's just important to highlight the substance abuse. It is it's much more pervasive than we admit to and know about. And just to kind of plug one of the other episodes from this season is Dr. Nishant Patel, who's a recovering alcoholic, and gives a tremendous story of his story of recovery and working through it, and not necessarily normalizing behavior, but normalizing that we are going to encounter people with substance abuse issues, and they're not bad people. We can be supportive and help them be the best person they can be too.
Right. Well, what makes it hard from the standpoint of our conversation today is that, depending upon the substances, they can mimic kind of any mental disorder. And so they can look like any of these characters. So if someone's not coming in and admitting to it, it can be very hard to figure out. So the real hint is what we've been talking about. Adult people are generally creatures of habit, and they behave the way they behave because they've grown up to behave these ways. So if you have someone who you have, ongoing knowledge of, and their behavior suddenly changes in some way, and there's nothing temporal going on, no sick relative at home or something like that, no recent bad outcome or whatever it might be, you really want to suspect something like substance use as a potential etiology.
Yeah, and not necessarily suspect, like you got to call the authorities. Hey, what's going on? I've noticed something different is going on with you. This X, Y, and Z has changed. Do you want to talk about anything? And
yeah.
So one of the mantras in surgery for the longest time is, so-and-so's got terrible bedside manner, but they're a great surgeon, so we're just going to let it slide. And I try and talk to the trainees and such now that, that it's 2022. We shouldn't really accept poor behaviors. So how do we work through some of these disruptive behaviors? How do we help our colleagues? What's the right way to escalate and get them help when they need it? Or on the flip side, is it okay to cut ties? When do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, the days of, well, that's just him, and he's, a great doctor, blah, blah, blah. The classic, caricature of the disruptive physician is the individual who says, well, I have to yell and scream and throw things because I am a champion of quality, and I am the best at what I do. And, I get upset and impassioned because I'm, really put out by the lack of quality that I see around this. That battle cry for quality is, to those of us doing this interventional work at this point, that's just sort of like, it's noise. Because the rejoinder is, of course, how is it that 99% of people have equal quality metrics to yours and manage to do it without all of this disruptive behavior? And so it just doesn't fly. And so I just think the culture is massively changing, as we know. I mean, maybe, the pendulum swung too far in some directions, but at the end of the day, it's certainly not going to be the way it was when I was a medical student in the 80s. It's not going to ever be like that again, I'm going to guess. So, there are, of course, those people who are aware and who say, okay, I realize that this is something that I always did, and it's probably not okay, and I'm going to correct this before I get in trouble. So that would be the most insightful. Then there's going to be the people who, as we said before, are doing certain things, and then fortunately for them, somebody calls it out and they go, yeah, okay, you're right. I realize that that's probably not something I should keep doing, and they can correct. Then there are the people who are going to say, yeah, I know it's a problem. I want to fix it. I don't know how to. And we get the tools. We for someone who, a common thing is somebody who just kind of can keep it together to a point, and then like mercury popping out of a thermometer, they just fly off the handle. And, those are good candidates for things like cognitive behavioral therapy, for frustration management tools. And then there are people who just sort of need charm school. They need to know how to say what they have to say in a nicer way. And those are good candidates for like executive coaching or something like that. But as we said, there are just some people who are, this is me. This is how I am. It's fine. I love how I am. And I don't care what you think about it. And those are the people that we have to really sit down and say, what is the risk benefit ratio of keeping this person if we don't think that the behaviors that are causing us trouble are workable? And if the behaviors are like not so bad, I don't know, maybe it's someone who, curses too much, and maybe you can make enough of, put enough of a fence around them that it's containable. But if it's something that's really kind of keeps coming up, it's a problem. They're really outliers, and they have no incentive whatsoever to change. Let's say they're very productive or even rainmakers or whatever it is, then you really have to decide whether, as a leadership group, these are the kinds of people that you want representing your facility or your system. And if the person's behavior is not consistent with your values, your mission, your code of conduct, whatever it is, then you do have to make the hard decision to, up the ante a little bit. And I would suggest that a very kind of great way to up the ante without hurting anyone is to create a behavior plan, which says, fine, you can be this way, behave this way all you want. You just can't do it here. You can't do these things here. You can't, make your medical students cry every day here. So yes, if this is how you want to be, go ahead and do it. But if you're going to be here, these are the behaviors that are causing real trouble for us, and you can't do them anymore. If you continue to do them, here's what's going to happen to you. And the sanctions might be as simple as you're going to lose your first OR slot, or you're going to lose your bonus, or you're going to be demoted, or you're going to be brought down to your salary base, or we're going to separate you. And I think that depending upon the various situations, you can kind of have a graded response, but you have to incentivize the person who is, for whom these behaviors cause them no, moral or internal conflict. You have to incentivize them to change. You have to find something that they want more from you than to behave this way.
That's a great point. And I think one of the ways you finish the book, and I think really important to talk about too, is listen, we all have insight or lack thereof. When I behaved badly in the moment, I didn't have insight, or there's you wouldn't have done it. Most of us are like that. But how do we know when we're the disruptive person? How can we kind of be on the lookout for those things?
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you're lucky, someone's going to point it out to you. And ideally, it's going to be a peer who, has the strength of character enough to just come up and say, I don't like what you did. I mean, I remember sitting in meetings. I remember a 6'5" surgery chair, saying, well, why didn't this person just say they didn't like the behavior? And they were talking about like a 5'2", medical student. And you were like, who's going to come up to you and say, I don't like the way you're acting? It's just not realistic. It's so easy to tell your 2-year-old not to walk into the street, but who's going to tell a 6'5" surgeon to stop yelling at them? And it's very difficult. Anyway, I just started rambling so much that I think I forgot your question. What was the question?
No. Just like, how do you recognize yourself as that person?
Yeah.
And I was just saying, the other way you see it too is somebody gets a letter for, I don't know, off-color jokes in the operating room. And they say, well, why didn't somebody just tell me? Because it's hard to tell people that. And so the letter goes to the dean, or it goes in the evaluation or whatever it is. And then it's a big deal. But have the insight to say, you know what, I was wrong. I can change this behavior. And
yeah. So that's the thing. I mean, like I said, if you're lucky enough, and hopefully we can change the culture enough that people are brave enough to say, I don't like what you're doing right now. It's a problem. Or you know what, I'm just telling you this as a friend. I'm listening to the jokes you're making, and you know, you don't seem to notice that the culture's changed, but I do, and I think you're about to get yourself into trouble. Hopefully someone will do that. But if they don't, you know, then I think there's a couple of things. First of all, when you go to sleep at night and you're emptying out your mind, how do you feel about the way you acted that day? You know, I mean, I find that when you actually get somebody to kind of really put their arms around this, they don't feel very good about having yelled. They don't feel very, you know, and sometimes they'll say, well, I have to yell or whatever, but they don't feel good about it. And so it's kind of like the same thing of learning to be kind of honest or more moral as you grow up. You know, going to bed and not sort of having to ruminate about it, keeping your stories straight or anything. So how good do you feel about how you walked through the world that day? You know, and it's a real question. I mean, I know that sounds kind of hokey pokey, but honestly, if people really stop and ask themselves about how they feel about their own behavior, there's, you know, generally some knowledge about you know, how they are acting and whether or not they have to act that way. But I think the other thing is search, just again, how do you feel about yourself as you know, for me, as an example, because I think the reason I've become so good at this work is because I was so incredibly disruptive and out of control when I was, you know, a younger person. I mean, when I think about some of the things I said and did, it kind of blows my mind. But, you know, some of it is maturation. You know, you grow up. But I found that, you know, each birthday, I would think back and say, God, what a jerk you were last year. You know, why did you behave this way? Why did you do this? And, you know, at some point, you kind of say, I don't have to do it like that anymore. And then, you know, you go and you kind of get help. I've had coaching. I've been to therapists, and, you know, as part of my, I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, so it's sort of part of the training, but it's all been really helpful. And so, you know, think about, can you do better? I believe that as people, we all want to do better. And one of the ways to do better is to actually put the time into taking a look at how you act, how you interact with the world, and could it be better? So, you know, it's like a sort of a hero's journey kind of thing.
Yeah. And just to echo that, I mean, part of the reason I went on this journey and part of the reason I started this podcast and started talking about these things is, in retrospect, there were a lot of behaviors I had as a resident and junior faculty member that I went to sleep at night not proud of myself, or woke up the next day even less proud of the way I behaved. And I want to be better. I still want to be better. I know it can always improve. And I don't, yes, there's some learning that has to happen, but I think we could do better at helping junior people get through this process with less egg on their face. Let's put it that way.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Agreed completely.
So we're getting close on our hour here. So, you know, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's anything we missed that you really want people to know or understand that we haven't covered, now's an opportunity.
I think remembering that people don't act badly out of malice, remembering that there is no substitute for a direct conversation. These things spiral. They cause so much trouble. They waste so much time, money, and energy when all you had to do was just go up to somebody and say, you know, that conversation we had yesterday kind of stuck with me and I didn't like the way that you spoke to me. That's it. These things, they dissolve as quickly as that. So just sort of, you know, be brave and be willing to be direct, and understand that we all want to do better, and let's help each other do it.
Incredible summary. I couldn't do it better. So I will ask you then instead. You've worked with an incredibly diverse group of people, homeless people with real psychiatric illness, CEOs, surgeons, professional football players. Give us, you know, kind of which group is really interesting, where, you know, I'm sure they're all interesting in their own way, but give us a little insight into kind of what's exciting.
I guess for me, what's exciting is, I guess I still, you know, I told you I got my MBA in finance, so I thought about, you know, moving over to Wall Street or to venture capital, stuff like that. But there's nothing as exciting as the human story. And I particularly love psychotic people because their minds are unleashed. You know, it's a lonely place to be. I wouldn't want to be psychotic, but, you know, a mind set free is a very interesting thing. And so I think I just have always love seeing how people navigate their mind and their thoughts in the various parts of the world that they've chosen to put themselves in, and how you can sort of see what in what fields, what types of things dominate. So all of that is interesting to me. I don't think I have a particular group that I like more than others. I certainly have some, psychiatric categories of illness that I don't particularly like to treat, but in terms of just people and hearing their stories and helping them do better, it's all good for me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing time. I do want to just highlight a couple of things you said in the beginning and throughout. Listen, conflict is normal. It's incredibly normal. And people don't set out to be disruptive, as you said. So kind of addressing that conflict, working through things together is what gives us strength. And your 5 points, just to highlight them again: check yourself. Did something really happen? Pay attention to that interaction. Name the beast, what exactly bothers you. Try to empathize or listen to the people you're interacting with. Call it out and be direct and concise in the way you address and work through these things. And I think people will ultimately respect you for it, whether or not you can improve that interaction. And then lastly, the go to bed at night test, I think, is wonderful. Think about the way you acted throughout the day. And if you're not happy with it, then what ways can you improve yourself to be a better person?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been incredible talking to you, and I look forward to interacting more.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.